Welcome back to For Perspective. I'm Bill. Today I've got a little bit of Apple and AI news, and then we'll get right into how boring productivity is often better than a more complex system. So I was on vacation this week, but the Apple news has been a pretty light lately. Some rumors about what the next iPhone will look like with a big camera bump on the back of it. None of this is super interesting to me. Something that is of note, though, is that Beats, the headphone company, released some USB cables this week. They look really nice, but I'm pretty much Team Anchor at the moment. Hashtag not sponsored. So I pretty much use Anchor for all of my charging needs, both power bricks and cables. The Beats cables look cool. I actually didn't go look at the pricing, but sure you can find cheaper options out there on Amazon. One thing that is interesting in the phone space, I'm a Verizon customer for my cell phone service. I got an email recently that Verizon is offering a 3-year price lock guarantee, which is actually really cool. Usually these services are typically raising your rates to the point where you get frustrated, and Verizon has been notorious for changing plans over the years and making you switch to a new plan. You have less features, it costs more money, so on and so forth. So I thought that was really cool. I'm happy that my phone plan isn't changing. I definitely did get switched to one of their newer plans and lost out on some of the features like having Disney Plus for free. But this had me looking at the Verizon website for some of the other packages that you can add on to your plan. And I found that you can get Google One, I forget what they call it, Premium or whatever. The one that comes with Gemini Advanced for only $10 a month through Verizon. So if you bought that through Google, it's a $20 a month plan to get Gemini Advanced, which gets you access to the latest models like 2.5. So that's a PSA to just, go check with your carrier. Some of these other deals that they have that you can get Disney Plus and Hulu, and I think ESPN. Don't quote me on that. Go check the plan. But $10 a month for an ad-supported plan. They have a Netflix and HBO bundle that are both ad-supported plans for $10 a month. So this could definitely be cheaper than buying all of these services outright. Yeah, you get ads. So I also haven't tested that if you sign up for one of these with ads and want to bump up, if it's a little bit cheaper to get on an ad-free plan or not. I may have to test that in the future. But, go check out Verizon, go check out your carrier if that sounds interesting to you. That was just something that I found out this past week. All right, enough about phone plans and cables for now. Let's shift gears to the ever-evolving, sometimes controversial world of artificial intelligence. And today, in things that nobody asked for, OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, are reportedly working on a social application. I don't know what this is going to be like, but, from the creator side, we already have enough places to post. I feel like consumers already have enough places to consume. So we'll see how this turns out. Perplexity has kind of a social feature where you can share your prompts. You can still use Twitter and Threads and other platforms for prompt sharing like that. So I don't really know what the benefit of an OpenAI social application is going to be, or even how it's going to work, what it's going to be. So that said, I've been critical over OpenAI and Sam Altman's money grab, trying to turn a nonprofit that is OpenAI into a for-profit for ChatGPT. Now that it's kind of caught on, and oh my gosh, look at how much money we could make. Elon Musk has also been vocal about this as well, because he was one of the early investors in OpenAI and claims that he invested in the mission of it being an open nonprofit organization. Well, it turns out when you launch an AI company like xAI that is for profit, you can do the exact same thing. So xAI reportedly bought or acquired X, formerly Twitter, which could be a huge move in the AI space, especially for Grok, now that xAI officially has all of the access to X, formerly Twitter's, data and users and information. So the AI arms race is still going. companies are grabbing big data, building massive platforms, highlights a trend towards more complexity. But does that complexity actually help us get things done day to day? This is what I want to dive into today: boring productivity. What do I mean by boring productivity? I mean simple tools that get the job done. Nothing flashy, no extra features, no frills and ifs or buts about it. These apps are pretty basic. And what do I mean by basic apps? I'm talking about things that are built into the systems that you buy. Applications like Apple Notes, Apple Reminders, Apple Calendar, or if you're on the Windows ecosystem, OneNote, Microsoft To Do, yep, even Outlook. Or if Google is your cup of tea, Google Calendar, Google Drive, and Google Keep. The more I dive into productivity apps and testing new apps, the more I miss the simple interfaces of these built-in applications. Apps that promise to do it all almost always have a shortfall. It's almost like the whole industry is designed to get you to buy more subscriptions. You want to connect two different productivity apps that don't really connect? You're going to need Zapier and create some zaps, which for a business might not be that big of a deal, but if you're a personal user or a creator trying to do these things, these subscriptions and API fees and costs associated with Zapier can add up. And at the end of the day, you probably don't even need all of these fancy features anyways. The reality here is that the app isn't going to save you. It's not going to make you more productive. It's not going to probably make you smarter or better or get you to your destination faster. But what matters is focusing on actually doing the work. So it might not be cool to talk about Apple Notes or Apple Reminders, but I've now been using these two applications together for a few years, and they definitely have some positives. So what are the benefits of using a free built-in application that I'm calling boring? The first upside is that it has a low cognitive load. So these things don't really require a lot of mental energy to manage. It's not like setting up a database in Notion or some complex system in Obsidian. You pretty much just open the app and use it and get your work done. You don't spend pretty much any time configuring the tool. All of your time spent inside of the app is doing work. Second is reliability and stability. These apps being built in to the operating systems is kind of a benefit and a downside. They don't receive updates as often, but this usually means that they are more stable and you're not relying on any third-party services or API integrations to get done what you need to get done. Now that Reminders has the calendar integration in iOS, it has me once again questioning my Fantastical subscription, but we'll push that to the side for another episode. And then accessibility, since they're pre-installed, they're free, they're available everywhere that you have that ecosystem. With iCloud Sync for Apple Notes, Reminders, and Calendar, you get it on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, on your desktop. You can even find it in the web portal now, which is a nice addition. And then offline support is really great for these things. You don't really have to worry. I've been on an airplane a few times and just needed to get some thoughts out, typed them up on my phone with Apple Notes, and didn't have a second thought whether or not it was going to, be on my computer when I got home. It was just there. They are also much more cost effective than other applications that, of course, require subscriptions. This might be the biggest upside to being boring is, you don't get some of these fancy features, but you're also not paying anything. I've already mentioned focusing on the fundamentals. So the core principles of your system, it really can have you take a step back and ask yourself, what do I really need this app to do? I need a notes app. I need something that's kind of like a to-do list. I like that those two things can be linked together. And then, of course, I like a calendar application to plan all this stuff out on a longer term timeline that's more visual than a reminders application. And finally, longevity. These apps being supported by the OEM that you bought your device from typically should mean that they would last longer. Now, I guess in Google's case, the meme of them creating products and canceling them does exist. But, for the Apple side and the Microsoft side, theoretically, these companies are far less likely to go out of business than some small startup that created your latest and greatest productivity app that has all of these flashy features. Now, as much as I've preached in this podcast so far about using simple tools, fighting the allure to these new apps is something that I am terrible at. There's always the next latest and greatest thing to go look at. The constant search for perfect, where perfect doesn't exist, but these feature-rich apps can end up becoming a form of procrastination in themselves. So the more time you spend optimizing the system, the less time you spend using it. And every time I go try something that has a little bit more features than Apple Notes or Reminders or Calendar, I end up missing the simplicity of this Apple productivity system. And while these fancy tools are powerful, relying on integrations, like I said, from third parties and APIs can become expensive and often is difficult to set up. Your average user may not have the experience to do that. I talked about feature overload and how having more features and just because you can doesn't mean you should. Notion has countless people creating databases, selling templates because in my experience, it's not that easy to set up by yourself and get it to work the way that you want it to do. So, buying a pre-made template from somebody just adds headache because you then didn't create it. So if it doesn't work exactly how you want it, you're kind of stuck. You may have to go back to that person and have them add updates or pay more when you could just simplify your system, because oftentimes I find that you don't need databases, which is, Notion is more of a database tool than it is a notes application. So, and while first-party applications can create, problems with data siloing and locking you into an ecosystem themselves, third-party apps have a similar issue, right? You're relying on a third-party, either cloud sync service or subscription model to house your data. And if you want to get your data out of that application, it isn't always that seamless. And that's kind of the case with Apple Notes as well, although there are some tools now popping up that make it a little bit easier, like the Obsidian migration tool. You can back up your Apple Notes into Obsidian, where you own the files. And obviously, the more complex the app is, the steeper the learning curve is. So you may spend more time watching tutorials and how-tos to set up your system than you would actually using it. I prefer something free and built in on the devices that I use the most. And these built-in apps aren't without their downsides. The gripes that I have personally right now is the linking between Apple Reminders and Apple Notes, and it's specifically bad on Mac. So if you have a Apple Note that you drag and drop on an iPad into Apple Reminders, or you can do it on the iPhone too, but if you're dragging and dropping from Notes to Reminders, you get a nice little note icon in the reminder that shows you that it's linked. When you head to the computer, though, on Mac, that icon is there without the Notes emblem. It's just a blank icon, and when you click it, it does nothing. So that disconnect between iOS, iPadOS, and macOS is really annoying. I know this is a small gripe. I like the app icon to be the icon that is the app. So the other way that you can link notes together that works everywhere is to copy the deep link URL. You need something like the Pro Notes add-on for Apple Notes on Mac in order to get the deep link. And then when you paste it in, you just get kind of a black and white Safari looking icon that shows you it's linked, which is annoying for me because I use multiple apps occasionally. I have Bare Notes that houses my newsletter, and Apple Notes kind of houses everything else, so podcast and YouTube channel. I do want to be able to glance at my Apple reminders and know, is that in Bare Notes or is that in Apple Notes? So when I click it, I'm not, oh, geez, okay. Now I'm in the wrong application and my mind is somewhere else. One other gripe I have on Apple Notes is that backlinks aren't clearly identifiable yet. This is another thing that Pro Notes helps with. You can view backlinks, but something like Obsidian, where the links show up in a right-hand column, along with a table of contents. And now I know I've spent the first half of this podcast talking about how I like Apple Notes and reminders being simple and free and built in and easy to use. But at the same time, I also want some more features out of these, some things that would make my life a little bit easier. With collapsible headers and subheaders now in Apple Notes, my notes have gotten really long. And I would love a table of contents to be able to navigate within the note, something like a slide over column on the right-hand side, just like Obsidian does, would be amazing. So for many people, these boring applications would do most of what they need to do. If you follow the 80-20 rule, it's like, these things will do 80% of what you need them to do, and it might not be worth chasing the 20% additional improvement with a different application that might further fragment your system. And I've recently started using tags and smart folders in Apple Notes, and this has saved me a ton of time. I don't really have to go rummaging around anymore. I don't move files in between folders. As long as you tag it properly, they go in the right place. So I have a folder for YouTube and podcast, and then when they're done, I tag them with posted, so they get moved out of that into a folder called posted to YouTube, or posted podcasts, or posted newsletter, for example. That way, if I ever want to go back and look at what I've posted already, I have a nice place for that. And when I'm in the podcast or YouTube folder, I'm focusing on just one thing at a time, which are all of the active videos that I have going. So at this point, I could pretty much move my Apple Notes system anywhere and it would work. I've simplified it down to these bare bones, sort of hubs using the Forever Notes system with links together. So as long as the app has note linking, that's pretty much the one thing that I would need. The tags and smart folders is great. Other applications like Bare Notes do something similar. So, I could go from Apple Notes to Bare Notes to Obsidian. I could even use Notion, but it would be way more complicated in Notion than I need it to be. And that's what I love about this system that I've created. So it does really come down to finding a balance, recognizing that some of these applications are super powerful. If you need to be collaborating with people, Apple Notes might not be the best tool. You might want something more powerful like Notion. But these boring built-in tools, even with their flaws, are better than getting caught up in the endless chaos of searching for a perfect app. Of course, it's a personal journey, so you're going to have to try out all these things yourself. My app history goes all the way back to 2016 with Microsoft OneNote. And I've used a plethora of different notes apps over that period. So that's my perspective on embracing boring productivity, the pros and cons of some of these built-in systems like Apple Reminders and Apple Notes, and living with their quirks despite them not being perfect. If you'd like to check out how I'm using Apple Notes and the Forever Notes system, if you're on YouTube, you can check the link right here or in the description down below. If you can leave a comment or a rating on whatever platform you found me on, go ahead and do that. Thanks for listening to this episode of For Perspective. Until next time, later.